everybody and welcome back to my channel. So I'm back with another colour pencil tutorial for you guys today, and in this video I'm focusing on drawing fur, and I'm using the colour pencil drawing that I did the other day of the kitten that I drew. So if you didn't see that and you want to see this full drawing, then make sure you go and check that out. So I'm just going to be focusing on how I draw the fur in more detail. And so the first thing that I do is I'm using the black karen-illuminants colour pencil, and I'm just using this to mark out all of the shadows in this kitten's fur. So this kitten had brown fur and black fur as well, so I'm making sure that I'm blocking in the shadows to start with, so I can see basically where all of the shadows are, and I'm making sure that I'm doing these in little lines that go with the direction that the fur is going in. So when you're drawing fur, it's really important to draw your lines with the direction that the fur is going in, because this is what makes it look realistic. So the fur is going in specific directions for a reason, so make sure that you really look at your reference photo and follow the direction that the fur is growing in. So I apply a bit more of the dark pencil where the majority of the shadows, so the darkest parts, are, but in general I'm using really light pressure at the moment because my technique for doing this today is to build up lots of light layers, and I'll be blending it out with the solvent. So once I've finished going in with all the black areas, I'm then going in with the brown ochre pencil, and you can use any sort of pencil, it doesn't have to be this exact pencil. It will depend on the fur that you're drawing and its individual colour, but the main point is to do the similar techniques that I'm doing. So I'm just filling in all of the midtones at the moment. And as you can see, I'm leaving certain areas, and this is where the highlights are going to be. So you don't want to saturate your highlighted areas too early, because you want to leave them as light as possible, because with colour pencil it's hard to lighten areas up if you've saturated them with colours. So I'm just leaving them white for the moment, and I will fill them in with colour, but if I fill them in now then I'll get lost at where the highlights are. So I just want to keep it clear where the highlights are for the moment. So once I finished adding in the brown ochre, as you can see, when I added that in as well, I wasn't just doing random directions, I was going with the direction that the fur was going in as well. And no matter what colour I'm applying, I will always be going in the direction that the fur is going in. I am now going in with the really dark brown, and I'm using this to transition between those really shadowed dark black areas into that brown ochre colour that I just did. So this will help make it look less uniformed of the shadows, the midtones and the highlights, and it will try and gradiate them all together. And it's really important that if you're using solvent, that there's enough layers down before you go in and blend it out. So I'm adding lots and lots of layers of colour pencil onto this drawing before I go and blend it out for the first time. So again, as you can see, I'm doing very short little fur strokes because this kitten had quite short fur, so if you draw really long hair strokes then it will just look really odd. So even though I'm using the karen-illuminants colour pencils, which are wax based, if you have the Prismacolor pencils or the Faber-Castell Polychromos pencils, they will all work the same. So with this piece I used a lot of Faber-Castell Polychromos as well as the karen-illuminants. So it doesn't matter what colour pencils you have, you will still be able to get a realistic look. All that matters is that you really take your time to build up the layers and focus on your reference photo. So to do this whole drawing, it did take me about 50 to 60 hours, which is a really long time to just sit and draw. But that's because I was taking my time, I wasn't trying to rush it. I know it can be really tempting to rush through it because you want to get to that final result, but it's really worth it if you take those few extra hours to just take your time and think about every pencil stroke you're making. Just make sure you're going in the right direction, make sure you're using light pressure, and make sure you're using the right tone for that area. So even if you pick a few colours, it doesn't really matter what colours you're picking, it's all about the contrast. So even if you don't have loads of different colours, just make sure that you have a shadowed colour, your highlighted colour and a mid-tones colour, and you can get really realistic, beautiful drawings with a limited range of colour pencils. You don't need hundreds of colour pencils to get a realistic drawing. So once I've finished going in with that dark brown, I'm going to be going in with a couple of other colours just to get the tone right and just to make it a bit more colour correct to the reference photo. So I'm going in with the burnt sienna, which gives a really nice rich tone, and I'm going to go in with the raw umbers and also a bit of a greyish sepia colour as well. And this just helps get the same tone for the kitten's fur as the reference photo. So now once I've added in all the colours for my first layer, where it was highlighted, I added a bit of white pencil just so that there was some pigment down to blend, otherwise those areas would look grainy. If you don't have enough pigment down, then when you use the solvent you'll just get a really grainy look, which you don't want. The point is to fill in all the white grain. So I'm going in with the Zest It pencil blend, and I'm not sure if you can just get this in the UK or in other countries as well, but it doesn't really matter because paint thinners work just the same, or Gamsol and stuff like that, so it doesn't really matter what you use. I've heard that the Mona Lisa odorless paint thinner is really good as well. So I just use a smaller paintbrush to fill in all the little detailed areas, and then I use a larger brush just to fill in those larger areas. And when I do the first layer, I do use quite a lot of the Zest It pencil blend, and the more layers you do, the less of the solvent you'll need to blend it out with. But for the first layer, I do use quite a saturated paintbrush of the solvent. And I'm just going throughout that whole of the face, and as you can see, it's got rid of all the white grain. We have no white grain there, and it just makes it look a lot more realistic. But it does make the colours a lot more saturated, so it does make them look more vibrant, and so you might not want this. So I'm going in with the white coloured pencil now, and I'm using that to fill in the highlights, and this is where I'm really starting to do the individual fur strokes. And as you can see, this goes really well over the solvent, so make sure that you let the solvent dry before you go in and add an additional layer on top, because if it's wet and you try to add coloured pencil over it, then it won't stick to it very well, and it might damage the tooth of your paper. So using solvent is really good because it means that you don't damage the tooth of the paper, which means that you can get so many layers and build up so much detail, which is really good, and it makes it really good to get details like fur and stuff like that. As you can see, this white pencil goes over the first layer really easily. It even goes over black colour pencil really easily, and it really shows up. So I'm starting to build up the individual hair strokes, and as you can see, I've made sure that my pencil is really sharp because I want to get really individual hair strokes, and if it's too blunt then I can't get that high level of detail that I'm looking for. And again, as you can see, I'm just doing very short fur strokes, especially near the nose where that fur is extremely short. I'm not even doing really fur lines, I'm just kind of doing dots or shading it in completely. And the longer fur is towards the top of the head and the sides of his cheeks as well. So I'm first establishing all the highlighted areas. So I'm just using that white pencil for the moment, and I'm going through the entire face, and I'm just laying down all the highlighted areas. And I like to do this whenever I'm doing fur, so even though I'm drawing a kitten, I will use this technique on all of the animals, where I just like to establish the structure at the start. So I block in my shadows first, the darkest areas, add the mid-tone, and then add the highlighted regions and just some colours to make the tone correct, and then I'll blend it out. And then I like to go in with the white pencils to establish the highlights, and I like to then go in and establish the shadows again and stuff like that. So I will have a technique and a method in my head, so it's not necessarily about the colours you're using, but the technique of how you're applying them and the direction they're going in. Also, I have done another video recently where I talk specifically about drawing cat's eyes and how I like to draw them. And if you watch that, you'll see that when I draw the fur around the eyes, it will be very similar to how I'm doing this one, and the method will be almost the same. So if you want to know how to draw cat's eyes, then feel free to check out that video as well. So once I've added all the white to the whole of the face, I'm going in with the black once again, and I'm establishing the shadows. So I'm doing it around the nose first and around the face, and then I'm going into the sides, and I'm just building on those shadows that I've drawn. So the shadows that I did at the start, so my first layer was really just establishing the shadows. So as you can see, it's just a blurred version of where all the shadows should be. There's no definition to the shadows, which is why I'm going in with the sharpened pencil, and I'm just adding some individual hairs to make it look realistic. When you're drawing fur, it's really important that you don't do all the individual hairs because it will look too wiry and it won't look realistic. Make sure that you do fur in very much the same way that you'll draw hair. So you just focus on the clumps and general locks of the fur rather than just every individual strand of fur. So the difference from when I blended it out with the solvent to now is just so much more realistic, and that's just because I've gone in with the white and black pencil, and I've just added those highlighted regions and added those black regions and some really sharp defined lines with a really sharpened pencil. And that's all I've done. It's nothing majorly complicated and difficult. It just takes a bit of practice to get it right, and just to learn where you need to apply the pencil and how much you need to apply to get the solvent to blend out correctly. Also, for the really high levels of detail, I like to go in with Faber-Castell Polychromos instead. So just at the end, I go in with my Faber-Castell Polychromos black, and I just use that to add some really defined lines because you can get that point a lot crisper, and it's really good to add fur as well. So that's it for today's fur tutorial. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did and you're new to my channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on my future tutorial videos. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, if you want to see me create all the rest of this drawing, then feel free to check out my recent video. I'll leave a link at the end so that you can check that one out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!